Vaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So I'll just read the Sanskrit from verses 21 through to 26, and then we'll do the translations, and then read the purports to some of the verses. Yes. Adityana Mahar Vishnu Jyoti Samravir Amshuman Marichir Marutam Asmi Nakshatranam Aham Shasti Vedenam Samavedosmi Devanam Asmi Vasava Indriyanam Manaschasmi Bhutanam Asmi Chaitana Rudram Nam Sankaraschasmi Vetesho Yaksharakshamam Vasunam Pavakaschasmi Meru Sikarinam Aham Purodasam Chamukyam Mam Vidhi Partha Brihaspatim Sanani Namaham Skanda Sarasham Asmi Sagara Maharishinam Briguraham Giram Asyekam Aksharam Yagnanam Japa Yagyosmi Stavaranam Himalaya Ashvata Sarva Vrikshanam Devarshinam Chanarada Gandavarnam Chitrarata Siddhanam Kapilo Muni. Okay, so the translations. Of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Of lights, I am the radiant sun. Of the Maruts, I am Marichi. And among the stars, I am the moon. Of the Vedas, I am the Samaveda. Of the demigods, I am Indra, the king of heaven. Of the senses, I am the mind, and in living beings, I am the living force, consciousness. Of all the Rudras, I am Lord Shiva. Of the Yakshas and Rakshasas, I am the Lord of wealth, Kuvera. Of the Vasus, I am fire, Agni, and of the mountains, I am Meru. Of priests, O Arjuna, know me to be the chief, Brihaspati. Of generals, I am Kartikeya, and of bodies of water, I am the ocean. Of the great sages, I am Bhrigu. Of vibrations, I am the transcendental Om. Of sacrifices, I am the chanting of the holy names, Japa. And of immovable things, I am the Himalayas. Of all trees, I am the banyan tree. And of all the sages among the demigods, I am Narada. Of the Gandharvas, I am Chitrarata. And among perfected beings, I am the sage Kapila. Do they normally do like that many verses every day, or is it they do that many verses every evening, or? Okay. Because I should read all the purports, okay? I'm just thinking about the purports, okay? Okay, so purport. There are 12 Adityas, of which Krishna is the principal. Among all the luminaries shining in the sky, the sun is the chief. And in the Brahma Samhita, the sun is accepted as the glowing eye of the Supreme Lord. There are 50 varieties of wind blowing in space, and of these winds, the controlling deity, Marichi, represents Krishna. Among the stars, the moon is the most prominent at night, and thus the moon represents Krishna. It appears from this verse that the moon is one of the stars. Therefore, the stars that twinkle in the sky also reflect the light of the sun. The theory that there are many suns within the universe is not accepted by Vedic literature. The sun is one, and as by the reflection of the sun, the moon illuminates, so also do the stars. Since Bhagavad Gita indicates herein that the moon is one of the stars, The twinkling stars are not suns, but are similar to the moon. So I guess we could go through each purport and then try to say something on each verse. Om H.G.Nanda Kinanjana Salakaya Chakshumalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this chapter is describing the opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and from these various descriptions we can understand the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Krishna indicates to Arjuna, when Arjuna asks Krishna so many questions, and Krishna is saying that for what need is there for all these detailed questions? Because by a single fragment of myself, I pervade this entire universe. So we can understand that Krishna has many, many opulences, and by these opulences, he's able to manage or control this universe through the different deities that he appoints. And in this way, the material energy is working in a very, very wonderful way. As Srila Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavatam, that if one does not accept the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then there's no question of understanding Krishna. We have to accept the Achintya Shakti, because the Lord, he is full, or he has multifarious potencies. And by these multifarious potencies, he's able to control this material world, or he is able to manifest this material world, control it. And in this way, he's able to engage in so many wonderful pastimes with the residents of the spiritual world. So we can understand that Krishna, he has these potencies. And we know from the Srimad Bhagavatam that the creative potency is coming from the right side of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the pleasure potency, Srimati Radharani, is coming from his left side. So in this way, by the will of the Supreme Lord, the living entities are able to live within this material world. And if one is able to become, or one is reminded of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like Prabhupada says, it is so easy to remember Krishna. The one simply looks at the sky in the night, and then he sees the moon. And by seeing the moon, he can think of Krishna. And one sees the sun, one sees the mountains, one sees the ocean. In this way, whatever he sees, it reminds him of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, to become Krishna conscious, or to be reminded of Krishna, is very, very easy. One time Srila Prabhupada was in Hamburg, and then they were walking on the waterfront. And then there was a tugboat that was pulling in the ship into the harbor. And when Prabhupada saw this, then he said, just see, this is like the living entity. That the living entity, he is completely spiritual, and he's very, very powerful. Just like the ship is very, very powerful and very, very big, but the tugboat was able to pull the ship into the harbor. So in the same way, the material energy can pull the living entity. Because he comes under the sway or under the influence of the material energy. So in this way, he becomes, just as the tugboat can pull in the ship into the harbor, similarly the living entity, he can be dragged by the material energy. Although he's of the superior energy. So we can see how Srila Prabhupada, he showed by personal example that he would see things and he would relate it to Krishna. One time on a morning walk, they were in a park, and then they stopped under a tree, and then there were some bird droppings on the floor. So then Srila Prabhupada asked the devotees, what is this? So naturally the devotees, they were reluctant to answer because it was obvious that this was bird droppings. So eventually one devotee said, Prabhupada, this is bird droppings. So Prabhupada said, no, this is bird droppings. But what does it mean? So then Prabhupada, he answered that it means that the bird, he's attached to that one particular spot on the tree. And therefore he sits on that same spot and he passes stool from the same spot every day. So like that, Prabhupada could see different things in the material energy and relate it to Krishna, or bring out the Krishna consciousness in these things. In the same way, Krishna is showing us in Bhagavad Gita that if we look at the material world, we're reminded of Krishna. And that's the whole point, that our whole life should be somehow or the other connected to Krishna. And that's the point of Krishna consciousness, that we want to be conscious of Krishna 24 hours a day. So therefore the living entity, sometimes he's covered by the material energy and sometimes he's covered by the spiritual energy. In the same way, Prabhupada said, just like the shoreline. So sometimes the beach, or we say the sand, during full tide it's covered by the ocean. One does not see the sand. But when the tide is out, or when the tide recedes, then one can see the sand. So in the same way, the living entity, sometimes he exhibits his spiritual potency, and sometimes it's covered over by the material energy. Just as the beach is covered by water in full tide, and then we can say one can see it when the tide is out. Okay? I'm a little bit nervous because I'm speaking to you first time. So yes, in this way, the living entity, he sometimes is covered over, and sometimes he's able to exhibit his true spiritual identity. So we can see how Krishna is always kind to the living entity, that sometimes people say that God has created this world, so how do we get out of this world? So this is one of the ways that we can extricate ourselves from the clutches of the material energy, that we're able to see things in a very, very clear way. And that brings us to the point of consciousness, as explained, that there are 5 stages of consciousness. There's covered consciousness, then there's stunted consciousness, then there's blooming or budding consciousness, then there's blooming consciousness, and fully blossomed consciousness. So the living entity, he goes through these 5 stages of consciousness. So the living entity is in the form of rocks and stones like that, so their consciousness is fully covered. And they do not exhibit any like life form, so to speak. And then the stunted consciousness is the consciousness of the aquatics, the plants, etc. The consciousness is there, but it is somewhat exhibited. And human consciousness begins with budding consciousness. That the consciousness is there, and it's described that this is the actual beginning of human life, when one begins to inquire Tata Brahma Jigyasa. So that is the beginning, so that is the budding consciousness. And as described, that is in relationship to one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that is the Sambandha Gyan, that one is beginning to inquire. And then the blooming consciousness is the consciousness of the living entity who becomes or surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is compared to the Abhideya section. And then fully blossomed consciousness is the consciousness of the pure devotee. And that is prayojana. So in this way we see how the different stages of consciousness, they correspond with the different stages of the perfected, or one who's trying to become perfect. That first is Sambandha Gyan, then Abhideya, and then Prayojana. So budding, blooming, and fully blossomed consciousness. So we want to come to the stage of fully blossomed consciousness. And therefore, by seeing the material energy in this way, in one sense, nothing is material because everything is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it simply depends on our consciousness. as Narayani Mataji was explaining this morning, that back to Godhead means, actually Prabhupada writes, it is a stage of consciousness. It's another stage of proximity. It's a stage of consciousness. So one can be in the material world, but he's actually situated in transcendence. He's already living in the spiritual world, because his consciousness is connected with that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, back to Godhead actually means it is a state of consciousness. So by seeing the material energy, by seeing, as Prabhupada explaining here, by seeing the sun and the moon, just like sometimes when one is preaching to people and we speak about the super soul, so sometimes people ask, like, who's witnessing? When Prabhupada was in college, then the professor, he was inquiring like that you Hindus, you speak about reincarnation, but who is actually witnessing? So they have no idea of the super soul, the Paramatma within the heart. And also Prabhupada writes that the sun is witnessing during the day and the moon is witnessing during the night. So in this way, all of one's activities are being witnessed by the different representatives of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this way, in one sense, there's no hiding place in the material world, because Krishna is able to see everything. As Paramatma within the heart, naturally he's observing the desires of the living entity. He's seeing the consciousness of the living entity. And in this way, he's able to fulfill the desire of the living entity, either in a self-full way or in a spiritual way. Because either way, the super soul is allowing these things to happen. So we should be like very, very conscious of this fact that that the idea is given here that we should somehow or the other remember Krishna. Just like the prime activity is to always remember Krishna. Everything else that we do, they are maidservants of this activity. Just like if one is described that the 26 qualities of a devotee are there. So if one has all the 25 qualities, but he doesn't remember Krishna, then all these other qualities are simply a decoration of a dead body. They're simply a decoration. Because the most important thing is always to remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So all the other activities, even in our activities in devotional service, they all become maidservants to the king of activity, which is Shravanam Kirtanam. Everything else is related, but they become maidservants to these two prime activities. So we should always be thinking how to remember Krishna and how not to forget Krishna. And Krishna is very, very kind that he has so many representations in this material world. Okay, so we'll just go on to the next purport. The difference between matter and spirit is that matter has no consciousness like the living entity. Therefore, this consciousness is supreme and eternal. Consciousness cannot be produced by a combination of matter. So if one studies, this is like one of Prabhupada's pet subjects when he's discussing Bhagavatam, or even when meeting with different reporters and scientists like that, that life comes from life, and life doesn't come from matter. And we see how, in actuality, that life actually comes from life. That Prabhupada would issue so many challenges to the scientists, that you know the chemical composition of the body. You're saying that the body is simply a combination of chemicals, and you know the chemical combination. So why don't you combine these chemicals and create life? And they would reply that in the future we would do this. And Prabhupada is simply a post-dated check. So no matter how big the value of the check is, $1 billion. But Prabhupada said, give me even $1 now. And in the future I'll accept that $1 billion. But even that $1 they cannot give now. So we can see how the scientists, they have become the modern day, they are the modern day demons. Because the nature of the demon is to decry the supremacy or the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is what the scientists are trying to do. they're trying to replace God by themselves, and they themselves want to become God. In the same way that the demons of the day, Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, etc., they wanted to usurp the position of Krishna. They wanted to become the Supreme Person, to the extent that they perform such severe austerities and control over the demigods, etc. So the same thing that the scientists, we may not have them performing austerities, etc., like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, but the same mentality is there. How to control the living entity, how to actually manipulate the material energy. And that is the nature of the demon, how to enjoy this material world for one's own benefit, to the exclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is the nature of the demons. And so they're simply saying that life is a combination of matter. Life is a combination of molecules. And in this way, we see so many crazy things are going on in this world. But all these things, as Prabhupada explains, will come to naught because no one can influence the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That you may be able to manipulate people, you may be able to control people for some time. But ultimately, the plan of the Lord, no one is able to thwart the plan of the Lord. And all these things are happening in accordance with the will of the Supreme. In the same way that Krishna, he brought all the demons together on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Just like when you have a boil means that all the poison has come to one place. And then you simply take some pen or you take some needle and then you lance it and then the poison comes out. So in the same way Krishna arranged the battle of Kurukshetra so that all the demons come into one place. And in one single stroke then all these demons are killed. So in the same way Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam that there are many empowered incarnations of the Lord, and there are many persons who are empowered in the way of executing the plan of the Lord. And it may not seem like it's divine, just like Hitler. It may not seem like it was a divine plan, but he was empowered to do what he did. So Krishna empowers different personalities, and in this way, by them executing their will, by them executing their independence, then actually ultimately they're executing the plan of the Supreme Lord. So the scientists are given some leeway, do this, do that, do this, do that. But ultimately Krishna is able to rope them in. And in this way the people become more and more frustrated. We see how the material energy is always frustrating the living entity. And the quest for enjoyment is so very strong. And practically speaking, Prabhupada describes it, this is the madness of the living entity, the pramata, the madness of the living entity. And Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice example in Nectar of Devotion, which he cites the example of the man who is being chased by a lion. The man is chased by a lion and his only refuge is a tree that is full of thorns. So what to do? He jumps onto this tree. And as he jumps into the tree, then his body is being pierced and torn by the thorns. And he's climbing higher and higher because it's not a very tall tree. And the lion is almost at his heels. And then he looks up and then he sees a snake is approaching. So you can see a lion at his feet, a snake is approaching. And then he sees a beehive in the same tree. And due to his moving about, he has disturbed the bees. So and the bees and the hive is oozing with honey. So in this way he's thinking, and then Prabhupada, this is the madness of the living entity, that he's thinking, I must remember this tree. Because when the lion goes away, when I come down, I must come back to this tree and get the honey. So this is the madness of the living entity. That somehow or the other, how can I enjoy this material world? And this is what the scientists are showing us, or they're trying to do, that somehow or the other exploit the material energy. Simply exploit it for your own enjoyment to the exclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the duty, or just like the materialists, their business is to create doubt in the minds of the spiritualists. And the devotees, they're creating doubt in the minds of the materialists. So this constant battle is going on. Who can reign supreme? The devotees or the demons? So this constant battle is going on. So we see how by preaching Krishna consciousness, so many people are becoming influenced by the process of Krishna consciousness, becoming convinced of the process of Krishna consciousness, and their lives are becoming purified. And we see, just like, I don't come into that regularly, but whenever I do come, and it's just like wonderful to see so many people, new people engaged in Krishna consciousness. Even in our own countries, we see how people are taken to the process. And sometimes you might think that actually, how is this actually benefiting people? How is it actually changing the world? And there's a very nice story that's given, that once there was an old man, and he would study Bhagavad Gita every day. And his grandson would also read with him. And the old man, he was like, he was a great devotee of the Lord. And the boy, he would just read like that. So one day he was questioning his grandfather as to, what's the value of reading Bhagavad Gita? I can see you are changing, but to me nothing is happening. So then so every day part of his daily chores was to empty the coal stove. So naturally with the coal, the basket became very, very black. So the grandfather said, go and take this basket to the lake and fill it up with water. So every day he would go and he would take the basket and then fill it up with water. But naturally by the time he came back, all the water was out. And this he would do like daily for 2 days, 3 days, like that. So one day he questioned his grandfather that, what's the point of you sending me to get water when all the water is dripping out? There's no value in it. So then the grandfather said, actually when you took the basket, what was the color of the basket? The basket was black. But now look at the color of the basket. So the basket had turned its natural color, it became white. So in the same way, by the process of Krishna consciousness, we may not be able to see it, we may not be able to appreciate it, but actually it's having an effect on people. And that's the value of association. That the more we give the association of devotees, give ourselves to other people, then the more they will actually appreciate and benefit from that. So don't think that whatever preaching that one is doing, whether it's in a big way or in a small way, that it has no value. It has immense value. And naturally people, they become attracted to the devotees. Just like many years ago, we still had the temple in Detroit, which was bought by Ambrish Prabhu and what's the name? Yes, it was bought by the two of them. So when it was actually a very, very posh building, it was like the best building that ISKCON had at the time. But it was in a very, very rundown area. But the devotees, they kind of set a very, very exemplary standard, and they began to help the community around them. They lent the people, they lent them the garden tools, they painted their houses, they cleaned their houses like that. And in a very, very short space of time, the neighborhood became very, very posh. So simply by even on the so-called material level, the devotees were able to help the community and raise the consciousness. So this is these are very, very practical examples of how the Krishna consciousness can work in a very, very wonderful way. So whatever we do, it has some effect. Just like Dronacharya, he told Yudhishthira Maharaj, he said, you go out into the world and you find one person who is better than you, or who is worse than you. And then he told Duryodhana, you go out into the world and you find one person who is better than you. So they both went out, And after some time, Yudhishthira Maharaj came back. And he said, wherever I went, I couldn't find anyone who was worse than me, because I have so many bad qualities. And everyone I met, they had so many wonderful qualities, more than what I have had, or more than what I have. So in this way, he said, actually, there's no one who's worse than me. And when Duryodhana came back, he said, actually, there's no one better than me. I'm the best person. So this is the materialist, that he's thinking I'm the best. In the same way that the scientist is thinking, we the best people. We will actually control this world. So they want to replace the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But as Prabhupada writes, that time and tide waits for no man, and ultimately time is the leveler. That the scientist and the materialist, they all are lying in the same grave. Just like when the war broke out between India and Pakistan. Oh, I'm Hindu and he's Muslim, like that. But when they were dead, they were both thrown into the same grave, into some hole. And no one could distinguish, this is Hindu, this is Muslim. So all these things are going on in the bodily concept of life. There are 11 Rudras, of whom Shankara, Lord Shiva, is predominant. He is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord in charge of the mode of ignorance in the universe. The leader of the Yakshas and Rakshasas is Kuvera, the master treasurer of the demigods, and he is the representation of the Supreme Lord. Meru is a mountain famed for its rich natural resources. So today is the Shivaratri, the appearance of Lord Shiva. So we can see how Lord Shiva is celebrated as the greatest of Vaishnavas. And if all the holy places, Lord Shiva, he actually protects the holy places. And in this way, he actually benedicts the living entity who's serious about the process of Krishna consciousness, who actually wants the Supreme Lord. And therefore we see how that the materialists, just like, oftentimes it's said that when one goes on Govardhan Parikrama, that so many people are going on this parikrama. And so many people, they're after material benedictions. So Giri Govardhan, he easily gives it, just to get rid of them. You're simply bothering me, so take this and go. But to actually give himself, Krishna easily gives mukti, Krishna easily gives bhukti, Krishna easily gives siddhi. But bhakti, Krishna very rarely gives, because bhakti buys Krishna. Krishna is bought by bhakti. In one lecture, Prabhupada said, why do you want to become equal to God? You can become greater than God. In the sense that Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, they're controlling Krishna. That now you eat, now you take bath, now you do this, now you do that. So Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj are actually controlling Krishna. So Prabhupada is making the point that one should that bhakti actually buys Krishna. That Krishna is controlled by devotion. So therefore bhakti is very, very rare. And to come to that point of bhakti, one has to be trained under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. So we, just like recently we celebrated Lord H.G.Nanda's appearance today. And he is the manifestation of the spiritual master. He's the original spiritual master. So it's described just like the disciple, he grows just like the lotus. Many examples, or like many things, are compared to the lotus flower. And also it's described just like the mercy of the spiritual master also. So just like in India there's the Ketaki flower. So it has a very, very fragrant flower. But it is full of thorns, just like the rose. So when the bees go there, their wings become, because it's also a very, very fragrant flower, their wings become torn. But still, because it is so so fragrant, they still go there. But then the lotus flower also is also blooming. And then the bumblebee goes into the lotus flower and is able to extract so much nectar. And it's described that it actually, from this nectar, that it actually creates an ointment. That if you smear it on the eyes, it actually relieves many problems of the eyes, the honey made from the lotus flower. But more importantly, that the instructions given by the spiritual master, it actually opens, just like we say, Om Ajnana Timirandasya here, that the instructions of the spiritual master, or the mercy of the spiritual master, he actually opens our eyes. So we can actually get a glimpse into the spiritual world, as to the nature of the spiritual world. So in this way, the disciple is always subservient to the order of the spiritual master. And that's the whole secret of the process of Krishna consciousness. If we want to make any advancement in Krishna consciousness, somehow or the other we have to please the spiritual master. Otherwise, we're simply wasting our time. Because without the mercy of the spiritual master, there is no question of making advancement. The Bhagavatam states that one should roll in the dust of the pure-hearted Vaishnavas. He should smear his body with that dust. And he should beg the spiritual master for mercy. But also not that we're simply begging, that we're offering flowers. We just see I offered some nice flowers at Guru Puja. But the real service is how to fulfill the order of the spiritual master. Just like when Srila Prabhupada was coming to the West, he was requesting his godbrothers, "Oh, please come with me." And their response was, "Oh, Prabhupada told you to go, he didn't tell us to go." So any excuse that they could make. No, Prabhupada said, "You must go, he didn't tell us to go." So we see how Srila Prabhupada, he was very, very determined in executing the order of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And his whole life was a meditation on how to please Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And in that way he was able to come and to achieve something so wonderful. And it is still going on by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So somehow or the other, the spiritual life means that we have to engage in the service of the spiritual master. And we don't want to become like foolish disciples of the spiritual master. We want to become intelligent disciples of the spiritual master. There's a nice story of the foolish disciple, which I'll say, and then maybe we'll take some questions. Like the Guru was traveling with his disciples, they were riding on horses. And then whilst riding, then the Guru's hat flew off, it came off. So then no one picked up the hat. So then this Guru stopped and said, "Okay, now pick up this hat." So the disciples, they picked up the hat. And then they asked, what else, if anything else falls, should we pick up like that? So he made the list. Okay, this falls, that falls, this falls, and you pick it up. So riding for a while, then the Guru fell off the horse. So they checked the list. Okay, no, there's no Guru there. So they left the Guru and rode off. So we don't want to be disciples like that. We have to become intelligent. And that's what the training means, that one becomes intelligent in the service of the spiritual master. Okay, I think we'll stop there because it's like 5 to 6. Can we just take some questions?
Read the rest of the purports.
Okay. Been others. Okay. So, purport to text 24. Indra is the chief demigod of the heavenly planets and is known as the king of the heavens. The planet on which he reigns is called Indraloka. Brihaspati is Indra's priest, and since Indra is the chief of all kings, Brihaspati is the chief of all priests. And as Indra is the chief of all kings, similarly Skanda or Kartikeya, the son of Parvati and Lord Shiva, is the chief of all military commanders. And of all bodies of water, the ocean is the greatest. These representations of Krishna only give hints of his greatness. Brahma, the first living creature within the universe, created several sons for the propagation of various kinds of species. Among these sons, Bhrigu is the most powerful sage. Of all the transcendental vibrations, Omkara represents Krishna. Of all sacrifices, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the purest representation of Krishna. Sometimes animal sacrifices are recommended, but in the sacrifice of Hare Krishna, there is no question of violence. It is the simplest and the purest. Whatever is sublime in the worlds is a representation of Krishna. Therefore the Himalayas, the greatest mountains in the world, also represent him. The mountain named Meru was mentioned in the previous verse, but Meru is sometimes movable, whereas the Himalayas are never movable. Thus the Himalayas are greater than Meru. The banyan tree, Ashvata, is one of the highest and most beautiful trees, and people in India often worship it as one of their daily morning rituals. Amongst the demigods, they also worship Narada, who is considered the greatest devotee in the universe. Thus, he is a representation of Krishna as a devotee. The Gandharva planet is filled with entities who sing beautifully, and among them, the best singer is Chitraratha. Amongst the perfect living entities, Kapila, the son of Devahuti, is a representative of Krishna. He is considered an incarnation of Krishna, and his philosophy is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Later on, another Kapila became famous, but his philosophy was atheistic. Thus, there is a gulf of difference between them. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay. So, any questions or comments? Okay.
A few days ago, Deenabandhu Prabhu gave a few days ago, Deenabandhu Prabhu on Parikram, he gave quite a humorous story on the banyan tree.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you want to relate that story, how it got the name banyan tree.
You can relate. Yeah, he was saying about the banyan tree, so how it's, I guess it's like a Hindu folklore or Indian folklore. So, yeah. So he was saying how that when the British were ruling, that the merchants, just like the Vaishyas, they would set up shop. And they would set up shop under the banyan trees. The people, sorry? The people tree, the banyan tree, yeah. So in this way, that's how the banyan tree got its name, from the Banyas or Gujaratis, the Banyas, like that. So they were saying that this is how it got its name. Yeah. I think the cause is a bit short.
In the beginning, you were discussing how all these representatives are witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all witnesses. So it reminds me of, there's a saying in English, you can run, but you can't hide.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
So Krishna is ever present, and it's very difficult to avoid his observations, or the observations of his representatives. So we should keep that in mind, so that we always feel indebted to the spiritual master and the association of devotees for reminding us of Krishna.
Yeah, one devotee, he said, actually, there's no privacy in Krishna consciousness.
What?
There's no private life in Krishna consciousness, because there's always some witness. We might think we can close the door and no one's watching, but so many representations are there. Okay. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.